Folks, thanks so much for tuning in again today. We have got some stories that are going to grab your attention, and it's interesting from day to day how different trends seem to emerge. Definitely today, everything from nuclear to knitting and around the world and back again, and the trend of glow up divorces, people really dramatizing, traumatizing, and glorifying their divorces. Let's see what effect that's having on the marriage rate, but quickly to the Middle East, of course, with the growing attacks that are back and forth. Iran, with its depleted missile supply, still managing to strike in areas where missiles seem to get through. And the US really cranking up the attacks back on Iran, and people wondering just how much longer can the regime hold on? How much longer can they keep 90 million peoples in fear and subjection? We know from studying the Soviet Union history over 70 years that as long as you very publicly kill people, hang people, and torture them in the public square, you can keep a lot of people in subjection. We're going to see what's happening. But one of the most dramatic shifts, and this has just come out in the last 24 hours, is the US under President Trump. This is a shift in nuclear policy, and it's related to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, you may be interested to know, though of course they're an autonomous nation, has, through the International Atomic Energy Commission, been under constraint in terms of just how much they can develop, or can they develop a nuclear industry at all. And a signal now from the US and from the White House that they are going to be allowed to develop and improve and enrich uranium, supposedly only for purposes of homegrown energy needs and other situations, but it is a significant shift. And people are now speculating, is this a case of President Trump signaling to Iran that their neighbors, Iran's neighbors, are going to be able to possibly move to ongoing nuclear enrichment? So that's really going to be grabbing people and discussion today, just in terms of seeing how far that is going to go. For sure, one thing that's going to be obvious is other nations in the Middle East are also going to be wanting this relaxation in terms of developing nuclear enrichment programs. Supposedly, again, supposedly for domestic purposes only. And the flip side of this, of course, is that small nuclear plants are being developed and manufactured around the world to deal with providing energy, especially energy for massive new data centers. But this, regarding Saudi Arabia, is a significant shift in terms of them getting a green light to go ahead. Well, yesterday I was talking about something pretty dramatic happening in the whole world of voter fraud. Are elections being stolen? Were elections stolen, etc.? We've been talking about that not just yesterday, but over the last few weeks, and how with the relaxation of voter requirement, voter ID requirement, with an increase in numbers going to electronic counting, which is problematic. Uh, there are real issues relative to the ability to do voter fraud. And of course, yesterday we talked about New Jersey's governor coming out and saying that they have discovered there was, quote, accidental um, problem in their motor vehicles registry, and 6,600 people were given names and addresses that never should have been. And that's from a Democratic governor. She is clearly on the left leaning side, and she is now expressing concerns. It could be that the lid might be starting to come off of media that attacks anybody who's raising questions about the possibility of voter fraud. You're being attacked as a denier. That may be shifting. And we saw just yesterday Jake Tapper over at CNN really pushing back, and really pushing back on those who are claiming there's no such thing as voter fraud. And he's saying, and he even referenced what I referenced yesterday. It's not often I'm ahead of Jake Tapper, but I guess on this one I was. He's talking about, look, we've even got Democratic governors now saying that there's a whole lot of leeway in the system, a whole lot of slippage, and it could be allowing for voter fraud, and technology can really be an issue there. Well, talking about technology, Meta has made an announcement, and they did it kind of quietly, because certain things have to be announced. But they've got a product out now called Story Kit. Story Kit. And it is video generation for kids. It's allowing kids to take even a photograph. It can be a photograph they have in their own files. It can be something of Mickey Mouse. It doesn't matter who it is. They can take, and then the kid. This is geared for like 6 and 7 years old. Can just dictate what they want that particular photo to turn into in terms of a video generated mini movie, really. And the kids can get these the characters, which they pick, their photos, whatever they want, to do whatever they think right before their eyes. So this is raising some concerns. Of course, guaranteed there's going to be more being looked at here when you have places like Meta and their new Story Kit app. Parents, you may want to be paying attention to that. Well, inflation continues to be an issue. And looking at the Canadian side here, so we've got the government saying inflation is down to 2.8%. Now, they're measuring this over the last 3 months. And the main factor there actually has been not government getting something under control, but with the price of the oil price dropping so much as the Strait of Hormuz was sort of getting more under control, and other shipping routes for oil and gas were opening up. And so the price of oil and gas was dropping considerably. Just recently now, of course, there's been a shift in that, but here we have governments taking credit for wrestling inflation when the main factor is, as you know, when they measure inflation, they take what's called a basket of goods and they measure those goods moving up and down. And the price of oil had been moving down so much that it affected the overall inflation numbers. But when you start to zero in, reporting just yesterday, for instance, on things like chicken thighs, interestingly enough, being used as an example here, where the price, it continues to go up. May to June, just 1 month, the price of chicken thighs going up 8.3%, and year to year going up 13%. So a number of factors that are affecting that. Um, that's quite an increase, 13.6% on just one product, but it's a product that's in high demand. And in Canada, we have what's called, and our American friends will be interested in this if they may or may not have heard of it, but we have a supply side protection for a number of agriculture products in which we are so-called protected, where the U.S. has for years not been able to flood the Canadian market with poultry products, eggs, and milk products. And so Canadians traditionally pay higher for these. When we all know, when we go to the United States, we see milk prices, egg prices generally lower quite a bit than Canada. And the situation here in Canada now with poultry prices going up, result of certainly we are confined by our own legislation, which doesn't allow a lot of competition to come in over the border. That keeps prices higher. But the demand, again, we talked about this over a week ago. It's a continued story coming out today. The demand for increased protein as people are looking more and more to their diets and moving away from plant-based protein just because it takes longer to prepare, longer to cook properly, and recent concerns about higher levels of trace metals in some of the plant proteins. So more and more shift seems to be beef is still, of course, people moving to ground beef to fight the increase or try and moderate it somewhat in terms of steak prices. But chicken definitely being zeroed in on. And remember, when the government sees these problems caused by inflation and other factors, then big governments, liberal governments, try and get into the act, and more. And I was talking about this 3 and 4 years ago. Every time you hear a government official use the word food security, that's just the government signaling they're going to get more and more into the grocery business. That is bad, bad for consumers, whether it's being done in a gigantic way, as with the uh, self-confessed communist mayor of New York City. Also bad in Canada when you see government looking to other areas rather than to their own spending to try and bring inflation under control. The government's goal is to distract people from government spending programs and trying to make it sound, as always, like the big bad people who are in the world of commerce, the world of business, the grocery markets. Yes, we always need to monitor those markets to make sure collusion does not happen, as happened with the so-called bread scandal several years ago. But when you hear your governments talking about taking over the grocery business, that is a dangerous sign, folks. Prices only go up. And remember, the single greatest cause of inflation, all you regular watchers and listeners, yes, you don't have to repeat after me, but for the newbies out there, single greatest cause of inflation is government increasing spending with borrowed money. So every time, and I keep saying this, every time you hear a politician, I don't care what the political party, announcing a new spending initiative, you can guarantee the price of your groceries are going to go up. The cost of everything goes up when government inflates the money supply by increasing their spending and doing it with borrowed money. Well, somebody, who's talk about the government being up to mischief, Canadians will know, and our American friends will probably have heard of. I've talked about Tamara Lich. This was a woman who was convicted way back in 2022 when the trucker convoy in Canada was going across the country and raising the protests that were happening there relative to the COVID lockdowns. And she was found guilty. Tamara was found guilty of mischief, the horrendous crime of mischief. And she maintained she did not participate in mischief. She did not tell people to break the law. Matter of fact, she was out there on the line saying maybe truckers should, be careful and be careful about breaking the law. Anyway, she was found guilty of mischief. That her court case has been dragging on. She's gone to jail. She is actually still, a lot of Canadians don't know, she is still under some measures of house arrest. Believe it or not, she recently had to ask the government for permission to go and visit her grandkids. And now has to ask for permission to go on a cruise. And she's got a good lawyer. Of course, Greenspan is a well-known lawyer in Canada. And in spite of that, even though the courts recently relaxed some of her house arrest, the government of Canada, make no mistake about it, it's the government of Canada, it is not just the legal system, is actually appealing that and saying she shouldn't have any relaxation on her house arrest. This is the vicious criminal known as Tamara. I've met Tamara. I know her. You're going to have to go a long way to find somebody who's less violent and more peace-loving than Tamara. And anyway, she continues to be pursued by the Canadian government. It's a revolting, disgusting story about what the legal system is doing while, and I don't want to sound like people who always do the comparison, but the amount of crime on our streets, the things that people can do, the amount of times men are being released recently on assault charges, the amount of provisions that are being made for violence in all areas. But hey, let's keep going after Tamara, says Prime Minister Carney. So that is an interesting situation as we're getting reporting today, and there's a trend line. You see these trends in reporting, and as our research teams do the scan daily for you to hopefully save you from hours of doom scrolling. A number of articles talking about the growing anti-marriage trend. This isn't just something, of course, it's just being reported, but everywhere you go on internet, and especially this would be for Gen Z who tend to scroll more than others. They're more adept at it. And it's a clear, Madison Colombo is a reporter who's done a lot of work on this, and she's reporting today how this manifests, whether it's TikTok or through the celebrity mechanisms, this constant move against marriage, and how marriage is a terrible and awful thing, and you need to be free from it. USA Today, Ingrid Jacques is using a term called heteropessimism. Heteropessimism, that's infusing in the minds of women the fact that men are no good, and the best thing you can do is get away from them. And then you add to that along with the sort of glorifying of, and this goes back, the trend was really breaking through with movies like Eat, Pray, Love, and other such movies. But there's a growing trend. You can pick it up on TikTok and on other platforms called divorce glow ups. Glow ups, and not a blow up, a glow up, where women are talking about their divorce. They're showing before and after pictures showing them as a married woman looking very unhappy, and then as a divorced woman out there in the bar scene and the dating scene looking very, very happy. Look, this is not denying that there are not problems in marriages and that there are not issues that women face. Of course, that's true, but there is this glowing and growing sort of celebrity push to be free and reject marriage. And so we look at some of the studies on this, which the U.S. Census Bureau just released some studies. First of all, some are concerning. Uh, 47% of households, all right, people who call themselves households, that's where there's obviously more than one person and they're living in some kind of arrangement. Of all households now, and this is the US, Canada would probably track closely to this, only 47% report as being married. And now, if you go back just to 1975 when the study was done, 2/3 of all households were reporting that they were a married household. Could be just husband and wife, or could be with kids. That has dropped significantly now. Only 47% of households are reporting as married. But more, when you look onto the stats, is that you see on the so-called happiness index, a number of studies that were released. Some of these are just being reported on today, but in 2024, study that's just come out and completed now, the American Family Survey. Very interesting stat among 18 to 14-year-olds being asked the question. You know, you've seen some of these questions where people say, are you kind of satisfied? Are you sort of satisfied? Are you very satisfied? Are you super satisfied? Excuse me. 18 to 40-year-olds in that group, among those who are married, reporting completely satisfied or very satisfied, they are 3 times the amount as 18 to 40-year-olds who are not married and not reporting anywhere near under the category of completely satisfied. So the stats may show there's less households that are reporting to be married households, but among the households, those who report as being married, the satisfaction rate significantly higher. So we may want to give that some consideration. And actually, she concludes her article by saying, it's kind of an interesting plea. She says, men and women need to find a way back to each other. Men and women need to find a way back to each other, is the author, the statements of one of those. When we're looking at the area, the ongoing controversy in women's basketball, the WNBA, and we talk a lot about Caitlin Clark. Well, her teammate at the Indiana Fever, Sophie Cunningham, very, very popular player. And she's been sort of neutral in the past, or at least on making statements relative to trans athletes. And she took a lot of heat on both sides of the issue when not long ago she put out a statement, and she's been quiet on it since then. This is almost 2 years ago, saying, look, she loves all people. She's not down on anybody, and she's not going to get political or get involved. And now she has broken that silence and come out very clearly saying it is her wish that biologically born men, in other words, trans athletes, not be allowed in women's sports, not be allowed in women's spaces, be it change facilities and others. So Sophie Cunningham, in her statement, she said she's really been unnerved by the level of violence and hatred in terms of comments that she gets and threats, and coming from the left. Now, it's not saying that people on the right don't, there's not some angry ones there, but on the trans issue, it's people on the left that significantly move to anger, hatred, and threats of violence. She's been unnerved by that, and she has come out really strongly in support of, and remember, this is the Supreme Court in the United States, all 9 justices recently ruling that states and schools, other organizations do have the right to say no to a biologically born male wanting to compete in women's sports. So interesting comment there coming from Sophie Cunningham. In the New York Times, there's actually not just New York Times, but Reuters and national NPR, a number of publications just today, and I don't know that they get together on these, but they're all reporting on the resurgence to what they call grandma hobbies. Grandma hobbies, believe it or not. And this is a very serious and it's a measurable resurgence. When I say serious, I don't mean that in a negative way. But it's called old folks schools, believe it or not, old folks schools. A very famous one called Green Door, and that's in northern Michigan, where people go. It's not just that one, with another one reporting the John Campbell School in Northern Carolina. And they report this real resurgence of, especially among women, among young women, wanting to get back to finding out how their grandmas did things. And the courses that they're lining up for are things like basketry, how to make baskets, beekeeping, how to become more sufficient that way, and even sock knitting, believe it or not. Make your own socks, and there where you can buy socks very inexpensively. Anyways, not just limited to these courses, but a real resurgence and into some of these. And at the oldest folk school, I already quoted at the John C. Campbell School in Northern Carolina, they say the longest wait list for people to get in is the teen wait list, and it's mainly female teenagers. And they say they're doing the studies, and they're saying what's driving this. Basically, AI anxiety and the realization of the loss of personal autonomy, the ability to do things for oneself when AI is so incredibly taking over, is driving some of this. So a good time for me to give a shameless plug for my wife's book, Valerie's book, which is called Grandma's Guide to Raising Kids. It's now available on Amazon. And I know my wife, I can assure you, is not giving me any royalties promoting her book, but it is a great book and some real insights about raising kids there. It's available on Amazon. Actually, if you order it through Westbow, which is a division of Nelson Books, you even get more of a discount there. Well, in terms of women issues, and closing out on this thought, in the Jerusalem Post today, and it's interesting. So here you have Jerusalem Post, obviously a Jewish newspaper, reporting on the plight of a woman by the name of Ziba Mastur. Ziba escaped from Afghanistan after she became a Christian some years ago. She had to run for her life, and she had to find an escape through Pakistan. She's made her way to Qatar, and in that particular country, she has been followed by sophisticated operatives from the Taliban. We always think the Taliban are just, these Neanderthal maniacs, and they are maniacs, and they are psycho. They are psychos. The Taliban movement is a Neanderthal movement that is based on extremist Islamist policies. Anyway, they've been tracking her. The Taliban are appealing to the government of Qatar to not let her go. Don't let her escape to Europe or to the West. They want her sent back to Afghanistan. We all know what will happen to Ziba Mastur if she goes back to Afghanistan. And again, we say on so many of these issues, where are the women's groups? Where are the feminists who are constantly saying they're there for women? And here's a woman who will face the most vicious kind of torture and death that you can imagine. I don't even want to start speculating the horrific nature of what she will face if she gets dragged back to Afghanistan. To date, not one women's group standing up in support of her. For those of you who are people of faith out there, and I know there's people of faith who watch this podcast, and there's also people who don't proclaim to be of faith, and I appreciate that, but might be a time to be keeping Ziba Mastur in your prayers. Have a great day, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you tomorrow.